Looking at Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12, we're actually dealing again with verse 7. It was a couple of weeks ago on Saturday night that we dealt with this passage, and of course it's been so long you've forgotten, so I need to get you back into the flow of it in order that we might come to the to the conclusion and to the truth of verse 7. So we're looking at Matthew chapter 12, verse 7. So we'll have to do, of course, a little review. You realize that at the end of chapter 11, of course, Jesus is giving this phenomenal invitation, which is the invitation to rest. He is calling everyone who is weary and worn out and is heavy, exhausted, just absolutely exhausted with the duties and the obligations of life and the law itself, and he's calling them to rest. It's the kind of rest that isn't laziness. It's not the kind of rest as, oh, you sit back and I'll do it for you kind of thing. It's the kind of rest where we are to link with him, and in that linkage, he begins to carry our load. It isn't the alleviation, the elimination of the problems or the stress or the pressure, but it's, the dynamic of his presence within that alleviates the stress because he's carrying you. It's a rest in him, which is absolutely phenomenal. So he's calling everybody to come and say, join me in my yoke. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Then he marches you into chapter 12, Matthew does, and he gives these two examples which have to do with the Sabbath day. And of course, the Sabbath day is all about rest. So this is a playoff of that whole rest idea. So he's basically contrasting in chapter 12. In chapter 11, I've given you the rest that Jesus calls you to. Now in chapter 12, he says, I want to lay out for you the rest from the viewpoint of the Pharisees and how Jesus views that. So a contrast is set up. Obviously, the Pharisees believe that the rest is on a special day and it's the elimination of doing certain things. Jesus thinks it's not an elimination of things, it's the indwelling of his power within the things. And that changes everything. So he gives you this phenomenal contrast. Now, as you march into the first scene, the first illustration of what this rest is all about, it's a scene where in verse 1, they are going through the grain fields on the Sabbath day. Now, they're not in the harvest time. They're not harvesting. They are picking grain because they are hungry, which was legally correct. If you got a sickle and begin to harvest, you'd be in trouble. You'd be stealing. But if you're hungry, you had the right to pick the grain. So they're walking on the Sabbath day. Here's grain in the field. They're picking the grain. They, of course, are breaking the Sabbath day law 4 times. And as they break this Sabbath day law 4 times, the first time is they're picking the grain. That's harvesting. You can't do that on the Sabbath day. Second one is they're rubbing between their hands, which is thrashing, and you can't do that on the Sabbath day. They blow the chaff away from the rubbing, and that, of course, is winnowing. That's the third time you've broken the Sabbath day law. And then, of course, you, being the way you guys are, you would eat too much because you can only eat a certain amount on the Sabbath day, and you'd break the Sabbath day law 4 times. So we can stone you to death 4 times. So we got our stones. Again, you can carry stones on the Sabbath day, but you can't pick grain. Got to keep the rules right. Now, the Pharisees who are stalking Jesus at this point are all looking in verse 2 saying, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day. So they're pointing this all out to Jesus. Now, as they point all this out to Jesus, Jesus begins to answer them. And he answers them in 3 ways. He gives 3 dynamic, short illustrations answering their accusation. The first one is in verse 3 and 4, where he talks about David, who was being chased by King Saul. And David is king at this point, but he's not taken over the throne. Saul, the king, is still in control. And he's chasing David and a bunch of young men. So David is running for his life. He's been running 3 days. They haven't had anything to eat. They come to this town by the name of Nob, and lo and behold, there is the tabernacle. There is the temple tabernacle. In the tabernacle, they had the showbread, which was 12 loaves of bread, one for every tribe, and they baked it fresh put it on the Sabbath day on the altar. It stayed there all week. Then they baked fresh again and took the old showbread off and put new there. Of course, the showbread that they took off of the altar, which was old, could only be eaten by the priest. It was the law of God. Now, David comes in and says, oh, got anything to eat? No, only the showbread. Oh, we'll eat that. And he and his men ate the showbread. You just wait for lightning to come from above and strike them all dead, but it didn't happen. Jesus says that was okay. What? They broke the law of God. I know. Why? Because God is more interested in human need than he is in laws. God is more interested in human need, meeting the needs of human being, than he is in your rules. God is more interested in meeting the human need of life than he is in meeting ceremonial regulations. God is more interested in meeting the need of the human being than he is in having us work out be faithful to our programs. The most spiritual thing you might do on Saturday night is not come to service, but visit your next door neighbor and win them to Jesus. That's awful to say, isn't it? So if you don't come on Saturday night, I'm going to ask you who you won to Jesus. Wow, that's radical, isn't it? That's what he says. Now, he turns around, and if he'd have left that alone, that would have been fine, but he didn't. He turned around in verse 5 and 6 and gave the second illustration. The second illustration is that on the Sabbath day, guess what happens? The priest do all the things that should not be done on the Sabbath day. For instance, they slaughter animals on the Sabbath day in the temple. You can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. They lift the carcass of the animal, which was way too heavy, more than you could lift on the Sabbath day. You shouldn't be doing that. Oh my, they're doing all of they light fires on this. You can't do that. They just, all this stuff, and yet God didn't care. Why? Oh, they're priests. They're in the temple, and they're serving God. So it's okay. That's neat, isn't it? Then he climaxes, look at this, verse 6. He climaxes this illustration with, yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. Jesus just said he was greater than the temple. Why is he greater than the temple? Well, he's God. That's not why he's greater than the temple, although that would be a good reason. You know why he's greater than the temple? Oh, because he is a man filled with the Spirit and has become the temple. He says, guys, don't you know what's going to happen? We're moving into a whole new covenant. I'm the first one, Jesus said. And you are going to be the temple. So obviously, if you are the temple and God lives within you and you do everything you do to the glory of God, whoa, the priest can do that. Let me ask you, do you do everything you do to the glory of God? Well, I got mad and hit him for the glory of God. Think you better think about it again. Do you do everything you do to the glory of God? Wow. So it's okay on the Sabbath day. Then he gives this next illustration, the third one, verse 7, which we want to try to deal with again. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. Let me read it again. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the guiltless. Now, we dealt with this a couple of weeks ago. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. It is a statement right out of Hosea chapter 6, verse 6, out of the Old Testament. So Jesus is quoting their scriptures to them. Remember, he's talking to Pharisees, and he's quoting their scriptures to them. And we discovered that this passage is in the book of Matthew another time. It's back in chapter 9, verse 13, which I want you to turn to. Chapter 9, verse 13, same identical quotation. And of course, the whole mercy thing is also given us in the Sermon on the Mount. And we walked through that as well on Sunday morning, but also 2 weeks ago on Saturday night. And talked about mercy and the whole concept of mercy. And now it comes up in this passage. Now, if you turn to chapter 9, verse 13, what you'll find is that there is a scene that's taking place. This is the Galilean ministry of Jesus. And Jesus is going down walking down a street on the side of the street where nobody else will walk. The reason nobody else walks there is because it's the place where Matthew dwells, and he is a tax collector. And you'll note that Matthew uses this phrase a lot, which Jews did, tax collectors and sinners. You see that in verse 10. Tax collectors and sinners. In other words, it isn't, well, tax collectors are sinners, although they are, but tax collectors are in a spatial category of sinners all their own. See, there's sinners and then there's tax collectors. You know? So this is special. This is the worst of the worst. This is the bottom line. This is not Gentile sinners. You know, you can tolerate that. They were born of the wrong. But anyhow, but tax collectors chose to be this way. They betrayed their own people. They bribe, they cheat, and they rob, and they're hated. In fact, Jews won't even walk on the same side of the street as the tax collectors. So nobody goes over there because everybody hates Matthew. Oh, Jesus is going over there. Oh, look at him. He's talking to Matthew. Oh, wonder what he's saying. Oh, Matthew's getting up. Oh, what's he doing? Pushing aside all of his books. Whoa, he's leaving. Wow, he vacated the place. Yeah, he turned to his friend and said, you can have it. Whoa, Matthew's left the whole business, and what's he doing? Oh, he's going to follow Jesus, be a disciple, and write a book in the New Testament. What? How could that be? And isn't it interesting, the very first thing Matthew does when Jesus calls him and he gets up and follows Jesus, the very first thing he does is he goes out and gets all of his friends and throws a big tax collector sinner party. Wow. Of course, Pharisees wouldn't come to that. They're looking in the window. Oh, look at that. Oh, Jesus is lounging with tax collectors and said, oh, he's laughing. Oh, somebody just told a joke. Oh, wonder what they're drinking. The Pharisees asked the disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? In verse 12, Jesus heard it and said to them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Duh. Come on, don't tell me theology is difficult. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. And then in explanation, like it needed it, he gives this statement, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Now back up, I want to walk you through this. But go and learn what this means. Then he gives this statement from Hosea chapter 6, verse 6 that we're trying to deal with. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. But go and learn. The main verb of the sentence is not go. The main verb of the sentence is learn. We on track? It is an imperative, which means it's a command. So Jesus is looking the Pharisees right in the eye and saying, hey, I'm talking to you, which is the assumed subject. which obviously refers to the Pharisees, the ones he's addressing. So, in the command, he's saying, you, which becomes the subject, you learn. And it's a command from the lips of Jesus to these guys. Now, the word go obviously is a verb, but as you have already guessed if you've been around here long, it is a participle. Some of you are a little slow. It's a participle, which means it's a verb, but it's not a main verb. And in this case, it's acting like an adjective modifying the subject. We on track? So, you learn. Learn is the verb. Command. Assume subject, you. Well, what about you? Who are you? You're the going you. You are to go. So, you're the ones who are going to go. You who are going. Learn. Now, learn is in the active voice, which means you're responsible for it. Come on, you got to respond. Well, I don't want to learn. Then that's on you. But you're going to have to make a choice because I'm going to teach you. And if you don't want to learn, hey, take a nap, whatever you want to do. Hey, don't pay attention. Don't bring your textbook. It's all okay. Sit back there and whisper in your girl's ear. It's all right. But you're going to be responsible for it. So the learning is your responsibility. But the going is not your responsibility. Why? Because it's in the passive voice. You are going to be the one who goes. Now the word go there is really interesting because it has the idea that as you go, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to teach you. So this is not going to be a classroom, sit down, we have an hour lesson, goodbye, there'll be a test next week. It's not that kind of deal. This is, hey guys, I want you to go out there, Pharisees, and I want you to start going. Hey, you are going to do that because you don't have any choice on that. And you know what is going to happen while you're going around in your daily life? God is going to teach you. God is going to manipulate the circumstances of your life and bring to you these overwhelming lessons. And as He brings to you these overwhelming lessons, you are going to be able to respond to those lessons and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And how are you going to learn that? Oh, you're going to learn that by the circumstances of life that God is literally bringing to you, causing you to grasp the truths that He wants you to know. Well, I don't like that. I know. What I want to do is just kind of, I'll put my Bible on my pillow and I'll put my head on it and use it as a pillow and I'll just absorb it into my brain. Then I'll know. It isn't going to work that way. Well, could I just have visions at night? No, probably not. You'll probably have visions because you ate too much tonight, but you'll probably have visions, but that's okay. But it won't be the teaching of God necessarily. Well, how am I going to learn? God is going to walk you through, hey, you don't have any choice on this because this is His movement. This is His design. This is how He's decided to do it. So God is going to move upon your life through the circumstances as you're going, and as you go, learning these, you have a choice about whether you're going to learn this or not in the middle of your circumstances. And if you respond to this, you will end up knowing what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So, goodbye, Pharisees. Have a nice life. So away they go. Now, back to our chapter 12. In chapter 12, wow, here they are again, the Pharisees. How much later is this? I don't know. Is it 6 months? I don't know. Is it 3 months? I don't know. 2 weeks? I don't know. Let's say 6 months, just for the fun of it. So 6 months later, don't know that for sure, but just for the fun of it. 6 months later, here they are again. And guess what? The disciples are picking grain. They're not at a sinner's party. They're picking grain on the Sabbath day. Wow. As they pick this grain on the Sabbath day, they are saying, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day. Jesus, in this passage, turns and says, but if you had known what this means. Do you guys remember 6 months ago? We had this little encounter, the Matthew party that you wouldn't come to. Do you remember? And in that party, I turned to you and said, go, which you have no choice on. God is going to teach you and learn. It was a command. And you had a choice on whether you were going to learn. Obviously, you didn't learn, did you? But if you had known. I forgot to tell you this. The Greek word for learn is monthano. It has a synonym that is used in connection with it in several verses through the epistles. And the synonym is epignosko. Now, again, if you've been around here very long, you know gnosko. What gnosko is. Gnosko is the word for know. Not data, not information, but knowing in terms of experiencing it. See, I know all about grief. Well, sure I do. Why? Because I've read 15 books on grief. No, you don't gnosko grief. You nostos grief, which is data and information. My parents just died. Oh, you know grief. I just lost my wife. You know grief. Gnosko grief. So Jesus was saying, guys, I want you to go and learn. And the word learn there, again, manthano, is a synonym for that is epignosko, which is a beefed up version of it. He said, I want you to go out and God is going to bring circumstances to your life, which is going to teach you overwhelming experience. You're going to get this. Wow, it's going to be, you're going to go over the top on this one because God is going to teach you. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Now, here they are 6 months later. And Jesus says, verse 7, if you had gnosko, known, you didn't epignosko, you didn't even gnosko. What this means, you missed it. God moved. You didn't have any choice on that. God brought you the experiences you needed. God put you where you should be. God was writing it on the wall, man. God was bringing it all around you. God brought the right people in the right circumstances to teach you what you needed to know. God was distinctly involved. And what did you do? You shut down. You didn't learn it. That scares me. Hey, I got the salvation thing down. See, on a Saturday night, I get under conviction. I run to the altar. God, forgive me. Oh, good. Got my badge, got my button that says I'm now a Christian because I've been saved. I'm going to heaven. I got my certificate. I got my ticket. But that isn't what this is about, folks. What Christianity is about is not I've had an experience here and I'm saved. What this is all about is, oh, God is moving. God is teaching. God is stuck his fingers. God is, manipulating God is after. God is stretching. God is wanting to take you into maturity. God is wanting to teach you God is wanting to expand you. God is wanting to take your character and build it. God sees long range. God sees, where he wants you to go. God doesn't say, got your button. I'm on the trip. God wants to stretch you into that which he's dreamed you could be. He wants to make you the godly person. He wants to make you mature. He wants to make you a character. Well, some of you are that. He wants to make character out of you. He wants to, wow. How's he going to do that? Oh, you're going to go and you're going to respond and learn. Wouldn't it be awful to be 40 years old and inwardly you're 16? Wouldn't it be sad? Can you imagine a 70-year-old acting like he's 6? Isn't that sad? Why? Because I just never learned. Well, I didn't get the breaks. Yes, you did. Go. You don't have any control over that. God is going to bring you what you need in life experience. Will you respond? Will you respond? Now, it's really interesting that what he wants them to learn is, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And he quotes this, that's a quotation from Hosea chapter 6, verse 6. Now, the story is phenomenal, and we've talked about the story before, and of course you've read it because you've studied it. God came to Hosea, the prophet, and said, I want you to marry a prostitute. What? That immediately is, whoa. Now, it isn't like God just showed up, gave him this vision, and wants you to marry this prostitute. Well, go find one. Yeah, okay, I choose you. Come on. It wasn't that kind of a deal. He courted her. He fell in love with her. This didn't just happen. You understand? And in falling in love with her, they got married. So he married this prostitute, and of course she came out of the prostitution, which is beautiful, and became the prophet's wife. They had 3 boys. You don't do that overnight. So obviously this involves some time, right? So they've lived together. She's done the cooking, he did the eating, and the dishes. And it was the family thing. They had the family for years. One day he wakes up and she's gone. Well, what happened? She went back to her prostitution. Somehow, something took place in the middle of all of that allured her back into prostitution. He, broken-hearted, went after her. He searched everywhere. He could not find her. He looked and looked and looked, days and months, and looking and crying and broken-hearted. And here's a prophet who can't get his act together because his wife, he cannot find her. Where is she? He only heard rumors and could not locate her. One day, after all of this time of looking, he walks by the auction block where they sold slaves. There she was. Beautiful? No. Used. Sick. Dying. Haggard. Not much left. He loved her still. Bought her back. 2 pence and a bushel of barley. Cheap. She wasn't worth much. Nobody wanted her. He did. And in his love, he bought her back, took her home, and nursed her to health. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. You getting it? After he did this, God came to the prophet and said, Hosea, now you can preach to the people. What? Yeah, now you can preach to the people. Now you can stand before the people, and you won't just tell them data and information and repeat words. Now you'll preach out of your heart, because I want you to know that what you've gone through is exactly, God said, exactly, God said, exactly, God said, exactly what I've been going through. Israel, my wife, has played the prostitute. She's involved herself with other gods, and my heart is broken. And I found her in her brokenness, and I want her back. And I want you to go and stand before my people. And I want you to look them in the eye and say, I'm brokenhearted. God Jehovah is broken. God Jehovah is all upset. God Jehovah is wringing his hands. God Jehovah is weeping in the depth of his system and wants you back. Come on, you harlot, you prostitute, Israel. Come on back to your God. And God said, I want you to tell him this. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Because I know what Israel's going to say. They're going to say, well, now, wait a minute. We aren't that bad. We worship Jehovah. We went down to the church every Sunday. We did all the stuff we should do. We paid our tithe. We made our sacrifices. We did the ceremonies. Oh, yeah, we worshiped other gods along with it. But hey, we worshiped. We did all the stuff we were required to do. And God said, don't you understand? I desire mercy, love, intimacy, not. Now put that in the context of what he was saying. Husband-wife stuff. See, the husband says, well, good night. I give her a house to live in. Well, forevermore. You should see the car I bought her. Yeah, I'm only home about 4 nights out of the week, and the rest of the time I'm out. I've got some other friends. But I do my... No, you're not getting it. You do all the activities, but you do them without mercy and without love and without... I want you to get this. Follow this. It isn't that God doesn't want sacrifice. He set the sacrifices up. So when you read, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, it isn't God is saying, I don't want sacrifices. Forget the sacrifices. When God set them up, and we know how important the sacrifices are, because we know that the sacrifices of the Old Testament all are symbols leading to the sacrifice, which is absolutely essential, or we won't make it, Jesus. So it isn't that God doesn't want sacrifice. Well, that's what he says. We don't know. It's that you can't take the sacrifice, the mercy and the sacrifice, and divide it. They have to be combined. And the minute you divide them and contrast them, well, I do the sacrifice without the mercy, it doesn't mean anything. It's the mercy and the sacrifice together. Did that make sense? So this has never been about, well, I'll start doing this and I'll stop doing that and what? This is about, guys, I want your heart. I want your passion. I want you to love me. Because if you come to church without loving me, it doesn't count. If you preach without loving me, it doesn't. If you feed the poor without loving me, what? If you work for the church and don't love, what? Well, I give her a house. Good night. She ought to be happy. Well, what are you talking about? She doesn't want a house. She does want a house. But she doesn't want a house without your love. Well, we don't pick grain on the Sabbath day. You think that's the big deal? But in the midst of not picking grain on the Sabbath day, you don't love me. Well, we don't go to sinner's party. We look in the window and criticize. You didn't learn it, did you? In the circumstances of life that surrounded you, you didn't learn. He wanted to teach you, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Why didn't you learn it? Well, how do you know I didn't learn it? Oh, that's the end of the verse. Did you see it? You would not have condemned the guiltless. That's an interesting concept. Yeah. If you would have learned in the 6 months what God was trying to teach you, you would have had mercy and not just sacrifice. They would have been combined, and then you would not have condemned the guiltless. I don't know if we'll ever get to it, but I think it's in chapter 6 of the Beatitudes. There's this whole deal about judging. And the word there is the same word as here. And it's not just judging, it's the idea of condemning. You mean it's all right to judge? Well, absolutely. Well, sure it is. In fact, how can you not? I judge you drive a Chevy. Well, that's a judgment. I saw the sign on the front of your car. Well, is there anything wrong with that? Well, no. I judge that's an apple tree. Is there anything wrong with that? Well, absolutely not. No. Is there any condemnation in that? No. I'm making a statement. I made a judgment. I see your hair is blonde. Oh, is that a judgment? Well, sure it's a judgment. How can you not do that? Life is full of judgments. We're always making decisions. We see something, we decide. Come on. How can you not do that? Is God against that? No. In fact, he said, you judge a tree by its fruit. That's a judgment. Well, what's God against then in the judgment thing? Like here, what's this all about? Well, this isn't just judgment. This isn't just seeing, oh, I see you are an apple tree because there are apples on your tree. It isn't that. It's you're a stupid apple tree. Oh, I just went from judgment to condemnation. So it isn't the judgment that's bad, it's the attitude in the judgment. Wow. Come on, this makes sense, doesn't it? You've told your child 1,000 times, don't touch the hot stove. Can you believe it? The kid went right over there, put his hand on the hot stove. Now, how are you reacting? You can make a judgment. Oh, you touched the hot stove. You can make a reaction like, oh, you touched the hot stove. Oh, bring it over. Does that hurt? Oh, I warned you. Oh, please. What can I get some salve? You make it a judgment. Or you can say, stupid kid. See, one is a judgment. One's a condemnation. One's a condemnation. Jesus never, ever, ever condoned, allowed, did, wanted, put up with, desired condemnation. Why are you condemning? It's demeaning. Why are you demeaning? Why do you put people down? Oh, you haven't learned. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Jesus, all this time you've been trying to teach me? As old as I am, I should be. Oh, brother. I should know so much. Why am I still acting like a child? Am I so insecure in my life that I have to put people down in order to increase my own personal security? Am I so low in my own values of myself and my relationship with you that the only way I can feel righteous Forgive me, Jesus. Forgive me. And would you give me another chance to learn the lesson? I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Because I've been very, very good at doing the stuff. But oh, the inner heart, the passion. And while I'm praying, Jesus, please make us a church that's learned the lesson. Make us a church that never divides mercy and sacrifice. Make us a church that all that we do and all the activities we experience and all the ministries that we can dream up will all spill out of this passion and this love for you. And God, save us from programs to have programs, and save us from church growth, and save us from numbers on boards, and save us from getting the right people. And make us a people, make us a church that has learned mercy in the midst of sacrifice. And that every ministry that spills out of our lives would be because of our passion for you. And God, dear Jesus, please forgive me for my condemnation. for my demeaning spirit. Please forgive me when I have had a sense inside of me that I was better than someone else. And fill my heart full of yourself. Heads are bowed. The altar's open. It's a place to start learning. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. What you do, is it done because of passion, because of burn, because of intimacy? Wouldn't it be something if you became so consumed with Him that everything that was not of Him would be set aside? Wouldn't it be something if what He's been trying to teach you is such a oneness with Himself and such a linkage and companionship and oneness with His person that everything else became insignificant? And all that spilled out of you would be ministry because you are the temple. And it's all justified. Some moments to respond. Be obedient.